think we will get started here. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for meeting number 7. Here we are. We have had a good series of meetings since the spring, been reviewing, going back all the way to the very beginning of the downtown profile, some of the trends influencing downtown generally, but also this particular DRI area, have moved from our long list of projects we received in the open call for projects, now narrowing it down to the draft list of projects for the local planning committee to recommend for funding. We had a good public meeting on Monday. We'll share some findings from that. And then tonight, really looking to confirm that list of projects that the LPC members will be voting on. And then we'll talk a little bit about the strategic investment plan and the project profiles that are part of that. So that's kind of what we'll cover. Bob, if I can put you on the spot and just ask you to read our Code of Ethics and Conflict of Interest preamble, please. Just to remind members of what we've been discussing at the beginning of every meeting.
Thank you. On behalf of Tammy, each local planning committee member is reminded of their obligation to disclose potential conflicts of interest with respect to any of the projects that may be discussed today. If you have a potential conflict of interest regarding a project you believe will be discussed during the meeting, please disclose it now and recuse yourself from any discussion or vote about that project. For example, you may state that you or a family member have a financial interest in a project, or you are on the board of the organization proposing the project. First question, do any members on today need to make any disclosures?
As previously stated, I serve on the Landmark Society board, which has a stake in the Alta Vista project.
Okay. Thank you, Lauren. Anybody else?
I also serve on the Landmark Society board as well, so I guess I should state that as well.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. Okay. Back to you,
All right.
Phil.
Thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate it. So here's our agenda that we'll go through today. We'll just jump right in. A couple of project updates to share since we last met 2 weeks ago. First, Alta Vista had applied for funding from HCR for competitive 9% low-income housing tax credits. They were just notified last week, I believe, that they were not selected in this cycle. So they are eligible and are planning to reapply the next cycle. That request will probably come out this fall with announcements, several months after that. So in terms of their, funding sources, that's one that they are planning on, not yet committed, but are planning to reapply. And as part of the feedback from HCR, that it was mentioned to them that having a DRI award in hand would, make them that much more competitive in this upcoming round. But they are still, sponsors still planning to pursue that project. It would just push their schedule back about a year in terms of when they would be able to begin construction, assuming that they're successful in that next cycle. And then we just found out, quite honestly, this afternoon that the Kresge Hotel project has reached an agreement for site control, and that same sponsor is also acquiring the property in the building that would become the Main Street Commons project. So both of those now have site control secured. They are anticipating a pretty quick close coming up in early to mid-August. So they do have that. So that site control question, which some people, we've been discussing at the last meeting, that's been resolved now. So Kresge Hotel has site control of Main Street Commons. The project sponsor would be acquiring that property and then transferring it over to the city for them to complete that project. So those are our 2 updates. The other one, which we discussed last week, the Gateway and Atrium buildings, the sponsor is continuing negotiations with the current owner there, hoping to reach an agreement soon in the next week or 2, but it's still in the works. And so, they're optimistic it will happen, but just don't have anything finalized yet. So other than that,
Phil, which project was that? I'm sorry.
The Gateway Atrium project.
Oh.
That's the other one on our list that hadn't finalized site control yet. So they're still continuing negotiations, working towards that, but haven't quite reached agreement on it. Other than that, no real updates for the projects, either the ones on the draft list or the others in the strategic investment plan. So real quickly, just wanted to recap what we heard at our public meeting on Monday. I know several LPC members here tonight, as well as some that couldn't join us tonight, participated in that meeting, and so that was great. I think you got a chance to hear some of the comments that people were submitting about questions about projects and things. And so you see here, we just kind of quickly summarizing some themes from that. There were several questions around different decarbonization strategies. So really, I think some interest in energy efficiency, how projects are supporting bicycle infrastructure, for example, with bike parking or heating and cooling to save energy. Definitely some interest in the historic preservation aspect of a number of these projects, which are, by their nature, renovations. So preserving some of the historic fabric. A couple of comments around, housing affordability, concerns about displacement, but I think the projects on the draft list right now reflect a really nice range from market rate to workforce to affordable housing and even supportive housing. So it's really, addressing the full spectrum of housing needs downtown, which was great. And then some questions about parking, which, we had discussed as well at previous meetings. And then a couple comments that really can't be addressed within the DRI, but people, just mentioned that, hey, as more people are living downtown, we really need a grocery option down here. And then also some discussion around a downtown neighborhood center. So those are just, some of the things that we heard in the public meeting. And then what was kind of interesting as we went through the projects on the list, we used the Mentimeter polling function again, which we had done at a LPC meeting a couple meetings ago, to ask people, of the projects on the list, how much support do you have for this being included on the list? And so we'll flash through a couple slides here that show, Main and Clinton, Main Street Commons, definitely very strong agreement. The Edwards Building and Geothermal Cooperative and Alta Vista here, and then Gateway and Atrium and the Kresge Hotel. So all, in all cases, I think good support for the projects on the draft list. And, again, that kind of reflects a lot of what we had heard from the second public meeting. So I don't think this is too surprising. But, now that we've moved from the universe of all projects down to this draft list, I think it's good confirmation that there is public support for these projects on the list. I don't know if there's any LPC members on the call that were also attended the public meeting on Monday and just wanted to say anything in terms of, what they heard from the comments, or if there are any questions on this, but we can certainly take any of those now if you'd like.
Just one comment, Bill, on the slide before this one, the one before that, sorry. Well, we're gonna go back, keep going, sorry, right there. The Beyond DRI, the comment about, it says downtown neighborhood center, but I think what they were talking about was the neighborhood service center, just to clarify that, because I could see somebody reading it saying, well, what are they, center or what? I think the question specifically was about a service center similar to the 4 we have already in the 4 quadrants. So that was the specific request. So if we could just add service center instead of neighborhood center, neighborhood service center, I think that's what the specific request was.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah,
sure.
We will
No
update that before we post this online.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
I did like the voting process. I thought it worked pretty well. There was one point though where I was trying to vote and I was unfortunately doing it from my phone, and if you if your finger slips at any point, it takes your vote at that point and you can't go back and change it. So I undervoted one of the choices because I couldn't go back and change it. It would, I know it's not your software, it's software you purchased, but if there's some way to allow somebody a do-over, that would be helpful for future.
That is actually helpful feedback, yeah. But yeah, I think, you know, this meeting, as opposed to the first two where we were hybrid with both an in-person and a virtual, this was an all virtual meeting. And this was a nice way, I think, to kind of gauge the temperature of the people who were at the meeting and very quickly get feedback, since we had this, you know, fast turnaround from Monday night to tonight. So it's a, you know, I think a helpful tool and just another illustration of the support for these projects. All right. So now we'll kind of move to our first and, you know, most important objective for tonight's meeting, which is just finalizing the list of projects that the local planning committee wants to recommend to the state for funding, so that we can send out the ballot that LPC members will vote on. I just quickly wanted to share a couple of slides. Several of these are from the meeting on Monday night, but, you know, again, just kind of illustrating how we moved from our full set of projects we received during the open call, which was 27.5 to 29 million, moving now to this list of projects recommended for funding. That's anywhere from 12 to, you know, 16, 17 million. And then ultimately the state agencies will make their award decisions for the 9.7 million. So that's kind of the process that we're moving through. You know, we've talked about all of the different kind of aspects that we are considering as we look at these projects. We've spent the last several meetings kind of going through this information. And so this is the list that we reached at the end of the last LPC meeting that we shared with the public on Monday. 6 projects here representing 16.8 million in DRI requests, which is on the high end of what the state, you know, suggests LPCs recommend. But I think here we have, you know, somewhat unique situation of having 2 projects with, you know, large DRI requests, and also just a strong list of projects overall. And so I think, you know, from our team's perspective, this is a pretty good place to be. As we had discussed at the last meeting as well, the intention of the state requesting a list of projects that's larger than their 9.7 million is to allow, you know, as projects continue to evolve and change, as, you know, particularly in this environment, construction costs are changing on a weekly basis. You know, as they continue to vet those projects, it gives them some, you know, flexibility should a project for some reason not be able to move forward. They would be able to go to the next project on the list. And we've also talked about that, you know, while we're not allowed to rank projects, we know that, you know, the LPC has expressed a preference for a couple of these in particular, which I think has also been reflected in the public's feedback as well. And so we wanted to take a pass at kind of quantifying the projects that are on the list according to some of the, you know, key metrics that we're considering. So you see those on the left, the projects across the top here. It is, I think, a good illustration, one, that these are all, you know, strong projects, good DRI candidates. And also that, you know, the projects that the LPC has talked about as kind of priorities really do, I think, stand out as, you know, ready to go, very catalytic, very transformative, with strong sponsors backing them. I think that will come through in the strategic investment plan and those project profiles that we shared earlier this week. I think that will come through. And that's, you know, our goal is to make sure that we're really communicating the importance of those projects, even if we can't come out and say, you know, this, we think the corner of Main and Clinton really is the key to kind of unlock this bigger area. But we think that does come through. So this is just kind of another way of trying to sort of summarize the conversation over the last several meetings in terms of the support that's been discussed in these meetings, that we've heard from the public, project readiness, sponsor capacity, all of those things.
Phil, I've got a question for you about two of the big projects.
Sure.
Gateway Atrium and Alta Vista. And I'm asking for two reasons. Timing is important, and you guys just reported out that the Gateway Atrium has no site control agreement in place yet, and that Alta Vista did not get awarded the low-income housing tax credit. But they can reapply, and that a DRI award would help them to potentially secure that next go-round. So
correct.
my question to you is this. Can the Alta Vista project go ahead without the low-income housing tax credit, or has that now bumped the timing on that project out? Meaning, I don't know when they can reapply. Is it a year from now? Is it 2 months from now? If you could talk about the timing on both of these, and the fact that we don't today have evidence of site control for the Gateway Atrium. So could you share what you know about those two situations?
Sure, yeah. For Gateway Atrium, as I mentioned earlier, they're still in the negotiation process. They're, kind of working out the details. They, sponsor, I talked to SAA EVI actually just today. They're optimistic that they're just about there. They just don't have the final agreement in place, and so they're working towards that. They do anticipate that to happen in the next week or two, so even before the July 29th submission of the strategic investment plan. So in terms of timing for that, I think we proceed under the assumption that things will continue to head in the direction that they're heading. They'll have site control within the next week or two and be able to move forward with the project there. For Alta Vista, they are able to reapply for the 9% tax credits. That is an important part of their funding sources. So they, right now their plan is just to reapply in the next cycle, which those should be I guess that cycle would open later this year, like September, October, most likely. So they'd be able to reapply for that, which would push their construction schedule out, about a year compared to having an award in hand today. But it's still within the 2-year time frame of breaking ground that, the state wants to see of the projects that they award funds to. So in terms of the timing for that, it pushes it out a little bit, but it's still within the window of, getting off the ground pretty quickly. This project, has been in the works for, a couple of years. And so they're pretty far advanced with their design plans and everything. It really is at this point just kind of finalizing their funding sources, and they'd be able to start pretty quickly after that. So does that help?
It does. So our task today, are we essentially either reducing the amounts that we're recommending for any or all of these projects, or are we meant to choose between Gateway Atrium and Alta Vista?
Well, I think, the other option would be to say that based on the information we have, that, the LPC is comfortable with this list the way it is at 16.8 million. And, we move forward with this list of projects, because I think it is a strong group of projects. And I think because of those two that have the larger requests, that kind of justifies the slightly larger request amount. And as I have a couple other slides here to show sort of how we're building the case for Main and Clinton in particular. But I think, so that would be the first option, would be to say, based on what we heard from the public meeting, what we've heard at the past meetings, this is the list we want to recommend and move forward with. If the size of the DRI request is a concern, then it would be a decision of which of these projects would drop off the list. I would say reducing DRI amounts is probably the last option, because that, would potentially jeopardize the feasibility of those projects. And I don't think we would want to do that. As the state is continuing, negotiating with the sponsors that they select for the awards, they may, and there will be at least, likely one of the projects on this list would end up with a slightly lower amount than they requested to hit that 9.7 million exactly. That happens every round, but that's done negotiating, talking directly with the sponsor to understand, okay, if you requested 2.75 and we only have 1.75 left, where else can you come up with that money? So that the state, in those instances, the state still wants to make sure that it's a viable project that can move forward. So I would say,
only in that case, our community prioritization is not part of that. Meaning the state makes the decision about which project they go to. I mean, we're going to be over 9.7.
Yes.
So it's the state that will make that call, not us, unless we give them a tightened list.
Heidi, you're forcing me to jump in sooner than I wanted to in this presentation, but but I really, this slide I think is important to look at, and everything you've just said is 100% correct. The state will make some decisions, and what we need to do is really look at the strength of the projects all within all of it. And what I think what we're working to do both on our end and with the LPC, I think there are some really clear, without creating a priority list, which we don't do, there are some pretty clear, strong, fully ready to go, perfect DRI projects that are beginning to show themselves through this. And the Maine and Clinton, which you will see soon, and how we're kind of positioning it, I think it's the poster child for what the DRI can do for a city. And I think it's we don't make decisions, the state working together, but I think you begin to really see that this is what the DRI is all about, and this is what the city has positioned themselves for. And I think we're coming to the right conclusions. And again, Phil, maybe hurry up and get to that slide.
Wait, so I'm sorry. I have a question before we move on. I know, I don't, at what point can, an expert on the panel told us at some point that one of the projects does not need as much as it is asking for, and that it can be reduced by some amount. But I keep seeing that project going forward with that higher amount. And I'm just curious, at what point will it actually be reduced, or is it going to go into the state with that higher ask when we know that we've been advised that they can do it with less?
I think you're referring to the Alta Vista project, Anne. And in that case, that's part of the state's, if that project is one that the state chooses to fund, they would, go through that directly with the sponsor to, verify that would work. So to carry the current amount through just gives them flexibility as things continue to change, while they're waiting another year to find out about a 9% tax credit awards. Construction costs are probably going to keep going up. So to lower it now would run the risk that with that time and the potential, probably likely increase in construction costs, that could impact their project financials. The state, based on, our team's work, their own analysis, they're not going to give a project more money than it needs, even if, and that's again where there's some flexibility for the state to revise, award an amount that's slightly less than what the request is in the plan. And so if that is the case, then that would just, then the $16.8 million list is actually maybe a slightly smaller dollar amount list. And so that's, again, part of the reason of having, a selection of strong projects here is to allow for that flexibility and for the state to still be able to reach 9.7 million with the projects on this list.
And you told us last time that there is a strategy in your narratives, including the order in which they appear, so that there is a subtle prioritization. We've all expressed concerns that a project will get knocked out that we really wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right. And I think, so this is one of the graphics that Steve was referring to.
That will include in the plan document, right?
Mm-hmm. So in the project profiles, which are the narrative descriptions of each of the project, those include sections on public support and catalytic impact, community benefits. And those are the sections where we can really strongly and clearly state, how much support a project like Maine and Clinton has from the LPC, from the public. And that includes, not just these last two public meetings where there was a specific project proposal, but even at the first meeting, before there was a project proposal for that corner, we heard that those buildings need to be fixed up. They're holding this, this part of downtown back. So even before there was a project proposal, members of the public and, other stakeholders we were talking to were saying, something really should happen with this corner. And I think this graphic sort of illustrates that. There's been a lot of investment and transportation and transformation happening all around this corner. And it's kind of the last piece that will help unlock then further investment in this block of Main Street through these other DRI projects. And so I think, this is one way of kind of graphically showing that, awarding this project DRI is the chance to kind of complete or at least really jump ahead in the revitalization and re-energizing of downtown. So it's the narrative in those profiles is how we come across with that.
And not to jump over you, Phil, because you're probably about to say this, but Heidi, what I like about this and the other part of this that's in the document, the problem here is you've got 4 economically challenged buildings that just have never worked, and you can't, and that's why they're deteriorating. Yet they're the heart of the city, the preservation, the redevelopment, all of these things. I mean, there's such a bigger picture here, and this is at the core of it all. And we've demonstrated with our work with our team that this is exactly, it is going to take this much, and it is this important. And not only is it important just as the heart of the city, it's also, we're providing affordable housing. It's serving multiple purposes, which really justifies the spend. The catalytic impact of this, I haven't seen one. This is our 7th DRI or 6th DRI. I haven't seen one like this. And that's, I think this is how we're positioning it without prioritizing, Heidi, right?
Right.
Without prioritizing,
you
but
didn't
we
say
can
that
stay
either.
pretty clear
the
there are some
narrative-
benefits.
The narrative, I think your draft narrative does a beautiful job of laying out this case for this project, which I think all of us, it's like top of the list.
Mhm.
And interestingly, secondarily, same drawing, but with a red box where Main Street, the Commons, Main
Mhm.
Street Commons, because that's the other linchpin in pushing development west.
Interesting.
Mhm.
It's a good comment. It's a great comment.
Because this is very impactful. Well done.
Don't thank me. Thank my team.
And I think you're right, in terms of the catalytic potential of Main Street Commons then as the other project, opening up that pedestrian connection, creating a new public space that can be programmed. And then, that will spur and support redevelopment of the buildings on either side and create, potentially kind of a draw to this area. If it's a place that is programmed on a regular basis by arts groups, entertainment groups, or just has a great, restaurant on the ground floor of the Kresge Hotel, like they're proposing, that has a, local food bent on it, and people can come to sample the seasonal flavors of New York, like that becomes a draw that brings people downtown, that ties into the, a lot of the DRI goals that we've talked about.
By the way, both of these in the narrative, and I may have missed it, both of them increase the potential to attract conventions, because this section of Main Street has been an inhibitor to that. It's been deleterious. And that's been expressed by our friends at the Visit Rochester organization 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Both of those.
Yeah.
Very
I have a
big.
couple of quick corrections for this. The DNC Digital, that should be the Seneca building. DNC is just one of the tenants in that building, but there's others. And I would prefer to get rid of the Xerox name on Innovation Square if
Sure. Yeah.
those are two of our projects.
Which is part of why we share these, wanted to share this
Exactly.
ahead of
Thank
time,
you.
is to make sure we get this right.
Lauren, would it also make sense to outline your 1 East Avenue building? It seems to me like there's major investment.
Yeah, we certainly can. That's on the right-hand side of parcel 5, where you see that that brick stack right there is 1 East Avenue. And that's kind of the connection point from Main Street to East Avenue, which kind of curves into the entertainment district. So yeah, certainly, Dana, that would be fine.
And and this may be overkill, and maybe we don't want to go this far, but boy, I hate to not mention the whole Constellation Brands relocation of their headquarters, along with the aqueduct. I mean, it may be a little farther away, so maybe it doesn't make sense. But I mean, from an importance standpoint, relocating a Fortune 500 company into our downtown and bringing 350 new employees seems kind of important. So.
Dana, I would agree with that.
Well, I would have to say, oh, sorry. I would have to say, I agree with you, Dana, on that. And with the aqueduct, Reimagine Aqueduct project, that actually feeds right into the commons that would happen. So that creates a sole connectivity of downtown and move people around. I agree with you.
Right.
Can I agree also with that, Dana?
Can I add real quick? The Tower 270 is actually Tower 280. So that's just a labeling error. It doesn't really, it's not the name. And I know this is kind of an older piece, but the Butler Till building is one of the newer actual new construction that shows the Midtown block.
It's much taller than that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's got a few cars. That's about it right now, but we're working on it.
Yes, that's just the age of the aerial, unfortunately, but we can show it more as a 3D mass instead of just that parcel to show that it is complete. Yeah. So this is, one of the ways that we're working to, convey.
Love the diagram though, it's beautiful. It's very nice.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's the goal, is to convey that there is a lot of momentum here. There's been a lot of investment, and projects like Main and Clinton and Main Street Commons are the ones that are really going to kick off, if you want to call it the next round of investment here, like kick off improvements to this whole block. That's why they're so important, is to feed off of all of this energy and investment that's already in place, and to remove, these impediments to additional investment, or, the excuses for people, the visitors who are coming downtown for the first time and says like, oh, all this new stuff is great, but geez, look at this corner right at, this building right at the corner. It gets rid of that. And so that's part of this narrative that we're building in the profile to really make that come through clearly.
Yep.
And the other, one that we had discussed at the last meeting as well is kind of the interconnection of Main Street Commons with the two adjacent buildings, the Gateway and the Kresge. Now that we know Kresge does have site control, that one is, moving forward, which is good. But, there is still the timing question, that will continue to evolve. So it's possible that there would be a scenario where the Main Street Commons opens and it's still 6 months or a year or 18 months until both buildings are redeveloped and opening up onto it. But there are lots of good examples where spaces like that are still active, interesting places to be that can draw a crowd. I think the example in the middle here from Vancouver is kind of a similar scale in terms of, it's wider than just a narrow pedestrian alley. But you see there how it has, color and art and light, and there's space for programming.
I would have to say it, as you talk about, is the bottom corner of Fort Wayne. It does work because my work is actually on the other side of the sculptural piece. So it does work, and that alleyway is active.
Perfect. Well, there you go. Right from an eyewitness there. Yeah. So there are different ways for that project that can work and work well, independent of the buildings on either side. Best case scenario, and I think certainly the end result is that those buildings do redevelop and open up onto that space. But even if there is a period where the Commons is open and one of those buildings isn't quite complete yet, it's still a really active, interesting piece that can be a destination for this part of Main Street that can support investment in other, properties further away from this. So I think just to see examples of that hopefully helps visualize what this could be, even an initial stage before it has buildings on both sides opening up to it. So, the rest of these are, these are information we've seen before just with the individual projects here and kind of the ratings of them. And I think, so we can go back to any of these if people do want to talk more about them. But I think the message is that this is a strong group of projects, and this is the last series of graphics we'll run through. This was also from the public meeting on Monday, but showing how in and around the DRI area, there's been a lot of recent and ongoing investment, both in public infrastructure like East Main Street and the RTS Transit Center, as well as private investment like Sibley Square and the Glennie Building. And that if you start then to add in, these are the projects that are on the draft list to recommend for funding, you start to see, a lot of the buildings in that block of Main Street start to see new investments. And then if we add in, the other projects that are in the strategic investment plan, you really start to see kind of the scale of impact here that both DRI and other funding sources can help bring to this part of Rochester. So I think that is the exciting potential here, to really start to see that how in the next few years with DRI as kind of the catalyst to get several of these projects going, other funding sources can help the remaining projects get going. And this really, starts to realize its potential and complement all of the other investment and activity happening downtown. So this is back to our list. And so I guess we can just kind of open it up for discussion at this point. And I think the question really is, is this list of 6 projects representing, 16.8 million in requests, as they are today, knowing that, potentially through ongoing negotiations with the state, in that award process, like maybe that number comes down a little bit. Is this the list that the LPC is comfortable voting on to recommend for funding? And if not, then, which of these projects would drop off to bring that number down? So is there, any LPC member that just wants to offer their thought on this list, whether, we stick with these 6 projects, or, whether, you feel strongly that the list needs to be slightly smaller, and, what project you would propose to drop off of this.
I'd offer a thought. I really like all 6 of these projects. I remain uncomfortable recommending 16.8 million, just because I fear the projects that we have, strong consensus around, one or more of them may end up on the cutting room floor, because we've given the state too much leeway to select from. If you go back to the preceding slide, Phil, I guess there's a project here that, that stands out to me that's not like the others. And it's just because of, while it's within the footprint, it is, it's a little off the beaten path, and that is Alta Vista. I really like the project. I like the vision for the project, and I think it can be a huge investment. And that particular lot is no less important or ripe for development or redevelopment than the other parcels that we're looking at here. So I'm hard pressed to take that off the list, but I am, if I look at this map, and this really helped crystallize it for me, that one is it's disconnected, not far, but it's not contiguous with some of the other investments that we're looking at here. And given, what they learned about the status of their historic tax credit application, that also gives me pause. So I feel a bit at a loss, because I know we have a couple of colleagues that are on the board that, can't really speak to this. But I just wanted to throw that out there and see if there were any other thoughts. Again, I like all 6 of these projects, and I'd be comfortable at 16.8. I'd be more comfortable at something less than 16.8. So whether a project like that could end up in our plan, but not within the kind of the core list of recommendations, I would throw that out there.
Mm-hmm.
But Joe, I'm going to respond to you on this one, only because I'm speaking for Sam, who actually has to hop off for another meeting. I'm just looking at the comment she just posted right now. That she says she'd recommend keeping Alta Vista on the list of recommended projects. I'm agreeing with Sam in the sense that I think, as Phil alluded to earlier, and Anne as well, there may ultimately be a lower amount going forward. And so the 16.8, it is high. It's not out of the ordinary for these DRI initiatives. And, it does have its support. And so what I think we're doing, as we've talked about tonight, there's some really strong ones that are ready to go right away, which is exactly what the DRI is trying to focus on. To have a list, because we have such a couple large ones in here, I think it's probably helpful, to have, a little bit more for, this, DRI. And if Sam at Department of State thinks so. I'm going with that, Joe.
I think the rub of this, and we're beyond grateful for the 10 million, is that the density and the project costs in a more high-rise vertical environment than what we see with a lot of communities that have received the Downtown Revitalization Initiative grants. 10 million puts us in a tough, it's great, don't get me wrong, but it puts us in a tough spot because it doesn't go as far in an environment like ours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's really what we're dealing with.
Yep. Right. I think that's well said. In a urban environment with, mid-rise and high-rise buildings, there's just a lot more square feet that need to be renovated compared to, 3 to 5 story main streets in other cities and towns.
Completely.
A quick question about Alta Vista, and by the way, I recognize what Joe is saying. I have the same discomfort, although I love the project. And it's very important for the fabric of the city. So you really feel caught. But what was just said by Sam and Steve, you as well. Question, is the big, I noticed when you look at the breakdown of project budget and funding sources, the CFA process, did any of this come through that? Or is that something that could, and I know they're very sophisticated about the funding asks over at Ibero Development, but I'm just questioning, did I miss it? Or are some of these sources coming through that process?
I don't have their sources in front of me right now. I know through HCR was their application for Housing Trust Fund and the 9% tax credits.
Which didn't get approved.
Correct, yeah, neither of those got approved. There's the Homeless Housing Assistance Program, which was through a separate state agency. That was another funding source. And then the CPA, Community Preservation, or CPC, Community Preservation Corp, is part of that as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they had gone through CFA for other sources, that could potentially be another, outlet to help bridge a gap. We haven't asked that question to them yet, but I think that's a good point.
Can I ask a question? It's going back to, a comment Ann made earlier. Would Joe and Heidi and others, if there was a way, to potentially reduce that? I mean, and again, and as we alluded to, and I may be saying the wrong thing, so Phil, shut me down because you're more into the weeds than I am. But if it was potentially a lower, if they had ways to make this work, as we've discussed in the past, would that make folks feel more comfortable? And again, and I, having watched these over the years, those decisions will get made ultimately later by the state as they negotiate this. I would probably recommend, we've got a good solid list. We're in a good place. We've got general agreement with some, kind of minor concerns. But would that make anyone change their mind or be more supportive at this stage? And we don't have much time left. I worry about time. So,
but Steve, the same question should be asked about Gateway Atrium.
It comes back, and that's the negotiations that go forward afterwards. So, we're in the planning phase. Reality comes when they negotiate the actual deals. And so, our goal, with the LPC and with the planning process is to get to a place where, the LPC really is supportive of the list that is put forth to the state. And if we are feeling comfortable, then we actually may be in the right place right now. And it could be as simple as that. That's what we want to make sure the resolution we get to tonight in this meeting.
Right. And
I remain concerned about a couple of things. And I think overall the slate of projects is great. And I think that, there's a lot of really wonderful potential here. And, I still remain concerned a bit about the site control issues. I remain a little bit concerned about developer capacity in taking on more than one project at a time. I know that there has to be a shovel in the ground within 2 years. Is there a completion? No. So this can just be, you're muted, Steve, so I'm not sure what you're saying.
Oh, I wasn't muted. I was actually just not talking.
I'm just watching your head go.
There's, that there are the real purpose of the DRI is to get, you know, shovels in the ground and to get these projects underway in the near term. Yeah, but they've taken time and they will take time. So
Well, and that remains of concern because you know things can linger, and they have and they will. So that's of concern to me as well.
well, and I think, you know, when you look at, you know, Restore New York and even some of these buildings still have Restore New York money, you know, in them as part of their budgets, that, you know, that is one of the big reasons why we're increasing the overall amount beyond what the grant is. And, you know, what I think I can say is, you know, when you've got a really strong project, a strong development team who can implement and can actually get the shovels in the ground soon, those are going to rise to the top from a funding perspective, which I think is something that we should be thinking about here, because we've got some that we know are gonna, we've got well, one big one in particular that we know has the capacity and can deliver immediately, and that's important to note.
And to add to that, I think it's also important to remember that the DRI award is a reimbursement. So the sponsor doesn't get the DRI funds until they have a completed project. So even if a sponsor were to get awarded, start a project, you know, they're having to report regularly to the state on their progress. And, you know, if some snag comes up that they can't work through, you know, the state has the ability to say, you know, that they're not, you know, meeting the terms of their agreement. Like they had, the sponsor signs an agreement, a contract with the state agencies that sets out the expectations. If they don't meet that, then that DRI money can be reallocated.
And then are the funds only applicable for the sponsor of the projects, the awardee of the grants? I mean, if in the next 2 years the building changes hands, does that grant go with the project, or does it stay with? I mean, or does it just go away, or what happens?
Doesn't go away. That's a great question.
Yes, it came up before, I believe, and I can confirm with Sam tomorrow and follow up, but I believe it stays with the project. So if a sponsor were to be awarded a DRI fund, sell to another developer, that developer could carry out a substantially similar project to what is in the plan. They couldn't suddenly change
I guess that would be my concern. Is that
they couldn't change the project and do something different. It would have to be substantially the same as what's in the strategic investment plan.
Okay.
Is it advantageous to the point, I think, Lauren, you were also maybe getting at, a larger list and you have a project that fails, that if they came through on our original list, the money is more easily reallocated to one of those projects than one that didn't come through on our list, which makes a case for a larger list.
Mm-hmm. Right. That it's that flexibility. It's kind of a contingency to allow for that, because if there are no more projects on the recommended list, then the state goes to all of the other projects that are in the strategic investment plan. And there's, again, there's no real priority there. So they kind of pick the one that they, based on the profiles and their own, the next strongest one, but not necessarily, if there are none left on the list, they have to go to that bigger backup. So, that I would agree is, again, another reason I think in this instance where we have bigger buildings that are more expensive, that it's okay to have a slightly larger list here.
Question.
I think that's helpful. Yeah, thank you.
The Gateway Atrium portion of the big narrative that you sent us.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like the table for project budget and funding sources is still showing DRA funds of 4.5. So my question is that budget applied to Gateway Atrium or Gateway Atrium and Granite? You may want to take a look at those numbers.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. That has changed since their original application when it was going to be for all 3 buildings. But for Gateway and Atrium, it would be 4 million. And that their, I believe that was covered then with just equity that they had planned for Granite that would just be shifted over. And so any other questions or comments on the list? I mean, to go back, Joe, to your point about Alta Vista and what Ann had mentioned, you know, the potential that is not an actual $2 million award, but maybe it's $1 million or 750 or something. That means that the list is closer to 15 and a half, 15.8, 15 and a half million, which is well within the range that I think we'd want to be in. So again, if Alta Vista was selected and it, in those negotiations, they get the 9% award, other things change. They don't need the 2 million. They only need a $500,000 or $1 million, that frees up, a little bit of money for another project. So again, it's all kind of this flexibility that, it allows to keep it within this list of projects. But just allows for those, future contingencies.
Are you asking us to agree?
Yes, we are, Heidi. Do we have as a team, the 6, is the LPC in agreement?
I am at this point, based on what we've heard at this meeting.
Great. That's excellent. I mean, that is the real, we want a unanimous, aside of anyone who is, stepping aside on a particular project, but we're looking for an LPC team to be together. And it sounds like we have it right now. And I'm just going to take one.
Lisa, I saw you raised your hand.
Yes.
Is that with a question?
No, that was an agreement.
I like that.
Right.
Thank you, Lisa.
Same. This is Tammy. Same.
Good. We could actually end this meeting right now, everyone.
I agree, but I also agree with Joe's comments about Alta Vista being a little bit of an outlier. What we have on Main Street seems to be like what we were trying to capture from the start.
100%.
And if we really focused on that, I want to see those projects go forward more than Alta Vista, even though I think it's a great project, but that's kind of floating off to the side. It almost is a different district. When you're down there, it feels very different. So I'm fully for it because I like having, like you're saying, the safety net that it's there if for some reason the other projects don't go through. But I'm definitely feeling like the Main Street pieces, even the Gateway, which is a bigger one, at least that's renovating old buildings and bringing back Rochester life, which is really what I believe DRI is supposed to be doing, right? Like in its core. So, I mean, I'm going to vote yes, but I'm having a little asterisk by it that if that wasn't in there, I would not be, upset or disappointed. It'll get other shots.
Thank you.
I have a question here, Steve. When you mentioned earlier about Sam saying it was good to keep Alta Vista on, and you gave the thumbs up. What were you meaning by that? I'm trying to understand. I want to understand that dynamic. Does it work out for government? What is it? Just keep it real.
Sure,
I want to understand what it is.
Yeah.
Because I'm feeling what Joe's saying. I'm understanding what everyone else is saying. So I just want to understand that better, please.
Yeah, and I wish Sam was here because Sam, if you are, please talk. But I think she jumped off. All I was saying is I was just reading the comment because I wasn't sure he had seen her comment that she put in right where she was signing off. What I would say is, as our project manager and as representative of the Department of State, they've got some really good insights into this because they're coordinating with all the different state agencies. And we work as a team. We got the LPC, and then we've got all the the Department of State who's running this program, but all the other state agencies that are coordinating together, to help make these go forward and identify the funding. So I was just, it was a very simple, if Sam says that, then, so, but that was it, Sean, no more than, I was just reading, Sam's.
So it's a way to gain favor, is what you're saying.
We like to keep everyone happy. The LPs, we have a lot of clients in this process as the consultant team.
Okay, that's all I wanted to understand. Thank you.
Good, fair question.
Yes, yeah. And she and the other state project managers running the 18 other DRI processes across the state, they're also talking and comparing lists and looking at the size of them. And so, she has a sense of what the other DRI communities are running into, similarly with the construction cost issue that's common, I think, everywhere. And knowing, as has been mentioned before, that Rochester is one of the biggest cities to have one of these, and in a very downtown, larger scale environment. Some of the other big cities that have it, they're in kind of neighborhood, not necessarily neighborhood commercial nodes, but not necessarily buildings of this scale. So number of I think unique aspects to this DRI. All right. So
quick thought.
Sure.
If everybody is in agreement, and given what Joe and Ken were expressing about the outlier issue, if in fact the group agrees that keep them all in, but recognize that there is this other dynamic, then the narrative should be restructured to reflect that, both in the order in which projects are listed and in the narrative itself, that some statements need to be made about the projects that are on Main Street, that is a community concern and issue. So somehow the way it's structured right now, it doesn't look like that. It looks like that sense of priority is not reflected in the way it's laid out right now.
I mean, Phil, couldn't we certainly, in the project profile for Alta Vista, these comments this is all part of this process, right? So it's
absolutely, yeah.
And this conversation we're having right now, and about the fact of it's, what everyone's saying, we can certainly put in there. And then also in terms of the narrative, Heidi, which, and by the way, LPC members, please, you'll have opportunities to weigh in on this. The narrative really, I think we're seeing bringing it back to the, the Main Street, the original goals, so it's just, there's a number of ways we can emphasize what we're hearing on this call tonight.
Yes, absolutely. I think those are good points that we can bring into the description of each of the projects. And then it will also show, we'll have a map of the recommended projects as well. And so it will graphically be very clear as well that there is a critical mass on Main Street between St. Paul and Clinton, and Alta Vista is a bit of an outlier. Again, still very, strong, good project, important for downtown. But, as we think about, building critical mass for downtown, that's certainly a factor that I think the state would take into consideration as well.
Great.
So at this point, are we in agreement that our 6 projects here are the projects that will be on our list? Just as a reminder, in terms of the voting for this, the ballot will list the projects that are being recommended for funding with their request amount, and it will list the other projects that we discussed last week that we want to include in the plan but not recommend for funding with a $0 DRI request amount. And the vote is a simple yes, no for the group of projects. And for LPC members that need to recuse themselves from any particular project, you mark that project as a recusal from. But the vote is a single vote for the group of projects, not a one-by-one process. So that we will be sending out via email. And so in terms of the process, that's what that ballot will look like. So one last time, just to confirm that this is our list of projects we want to go forward with. We've heard, I think, a lot of good comments tonight, ways that we can strengthen different project profiles, highlight key parts of them to emphasize, the importance of Main Street, the importance of revitalizing a number of these empty buildings or these underused buildings. And so that'll all come through, and using, graphics like this and some of the other ones that we shared. Those are all things that we can, communicate in the plan itself. So just one final opportunity here. Are, LPC members, are we all comfortable with this list?
I am comfortable. Yeah,
All right, good.
it's a great list.
Yeah, good. Yeah,
Right.
good.
Excellent.
Excellent. Well, that was our primary agenda item for tonight. So next up is the strategic investment plan. And so I want to say, one more time that this, I think, this LPC has been very thoughtful and engaged in this entire process. We've really, the points that have been brought up have been very helpful as we're thinking about, the project profiles, how we position these in the strategic investment plan. And I do think, and our team thinks, that this is a great list of projects here, all of which have the potential to really make a big impact on downtown. And I think it's very clear which are the projects that are really, the cornerstones or the catalyst ones that just kickstart, everything else, all the other interest in this area. And I think that is the exciting opportunity that the DRI is presenting here. And I think it's great to have this list of projects that, the state will, I think, be able to look at and really see how their investment is really contributing to the momentum in downtown Rochester. So that's exciting. I think this is a great list. And, before we just jump into any other strategic investment plan conversations, I just, want to say that and to thank all of you for your contributions throughout the process. I think it's been very, very, very helpful for our team and for this process and for the city of Rochester. So definitely appreciate that. The last, agenda item we've kind of been talking about off and on throughout the meeting, but that is the strategic investment plan, which is the final deliverable for this planning phase of the DRI. It includes these elements that you see here. So the downtown profile and assessment, which we talked about at the first couple of meetings, talking about all of the great energy and investment that has already happened downtown, but also identifying the needs that are still remaining and connecting those needs to these projects on this group of recommended DRI projects. How are those addressing the needs that we've identified to continue that momentum and build on those strengths? It'll talk about the vision and the goals and the strategies that we developed with the public at our first couple of meetings. We haven't talked too much about the management and implementation strategy, but in this case, where most of the projects are led by private sponsors, they're the ones responsible for the implementation. The city of Rochester does obviously have an important role, both as the sponsor for Main Street Commons, but also the coordination between different departments to help facilitate the review and approval process as it moves forward. And so we'll just talk a little bit about that in that section. We'll kind of summarize each of the sponsors' kind of credentials and their ability to take those projects on. The community involvement section, that's an important part of this, to summarize the 3 public meetings, the surveys we've done, what we heard from that, and how the public's priorities are reflected in a number of the projects on that list, making that connection. And then finally, that project profile section, we sent around the draft of those profiles earlier this week for review. We've talked already tonight about a couple of areas where I think we can, continue to kind of refine how we talk about some of those projects, things we can add to those descriptions to help make them stronger. And so if there are, other thoughts, if people had a chance to start to go through those, if there's anything else you wanted to bring up and mention tonight, we'll certainly take that into consideration as we're continuing to refine and strengthen these. If you have comments that come up in the next, few days or week as you're continuing to read those and you want to just send our team an email, you certainly can do that as well. But were there any other comments or questions on those profiles that were sent out earlier? All right, saw a couple of head shakes. And then we'll just wrap up with kind of a reminder of what is next. The next big task for the LPC is just to return your ballots. We need the ballots from everybody, all our LPC members. So everybody on the call and those who weren't able to join us tonight will be sending out an email with the ballot. Want to get those back as soon as you're able to, but no later than Monday. That way we have our final record that we'll share with the state of the LPC's endorsement of that group of projects.
Bill, quick question on that. Are
Sure.
you, for the people who were not here to hear the discussion, are at least you're sending out the PowerPoint?
Yes, yeah, we'll make sure that everybody has this PowerPoint, and I think that's a good point. We can summarize some of the key discussion points as well, so that people who weren't able to join us tonight do have a sense of how we kind of talked through these issues, because I think it has been a really good discussion that would be helpful for people who maybe couldn't join the meeting.
And I'll add that as with all of our LPC meetings, a video recording of this will be on the city's website, so they can consult that as well.
And so you'll provide a link?
Yes, yeah, we can do that. So that's really the immediate task. As I mentioned, as you're continuing to review project profiles, if you have any thoughts or comments on them, feel free to let us know. The final strategic investment plan will be submitted to the state on July 29th in a few weeks. And then that's really the beginning of the state's evaluation period, as we discussed before. That'll start in August, go through late 2022. They typically don't establish a date when they make the award announcements. That's typically on kind of a rolling basis, community by community, over the course of several weeks. So that's likely to happen sometime later this year. And then implementation will start next year, continue over the next 2 years. As I mentioned, the state agencies are signing contracts with the sponsors that have reporting requirements that'll keep them honest, to make sure that those funds are for projects that are getting built and complete as they are described. And so there is an accountability to this. There's certainly not states not just giving the sponsors the money up front and saying, hey, go do a great project. They're monitoring that throughout the process, and that DRI award then comes at the end as a reimbursement. So I think that is just important to mention that again, in terms of some of the conversations we've had at this meeting and other ones. So those are the next steps to look forward to. Our team continues to be available. If there are any other questions or comments, let us know. And any other closing comments? Sarah Brent, as you're looking at the list here, do we have any members of the public with us tonight?
We don't.
Okay. So then just any final comments from LPC members before we wrap up? Or our co-chairs, anything you'd like to share as we're reaching the end of our planning process here? I know Tammy had said she was having microphone issues, so. And Lisa, I'm
I
just
think
going to.
everybody else is gone, so I think
Oh, that's right. Actually, she had to drop off. That's right.
Sorry, as a city representative here, I really want to thank the LPC members just giving up all of this time that you have from your private business and sitting through these hours and hours of meetings and just being so genuinely interested in this is awesome. And I know that we all appreciate your interest in these projects and just generally for revitalizing the city. So thank you.
100%.
Thanks, Ann.
I'd echo that, Ann.
Yeah,
I also want to thank you, Phil, and Steve, and Sarah Brent and the team. I thought the process was very well organized. You put us in a position to scrutinize the projects well and ask the right questions. So thanks for keeping us on track.
Here, here.
Thank you very much.
This is Lisa. This is Lisa. I just want to add, Phil, you did a tremendous job in keeping us on track, summarizing, fielding public comments, and it was really well organized and well done. So the whole team did a great job, and I thank you for that.
Well, thank you. You're very welcome, and it really was a team effort. Both Steve and Sarah Brent and others at Stantec, but also our team of sub-consultants who has been reviewing all of the sponsor material to help us understand the financials and the cost estimates and think through these issues. It really has been a team effort to get us to this point. And the LPC, your contribution to this really is what makes it happen. So I will just echo what Ann said. Thank you very much for your time, your thoughtfulness, really being engaged in this and really focused on how this award to the city of Rochester can really make an impact and change in downtown Rochester. I think it's a great opportunity. It's very exciting to be at this point. So thank you all. Thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Phil.
And with that, we will say goodnight.